There is a particular kind of ache that has no dramatic name, and so people rarely speak of it, though many carry it for years. It is the ache of being unseen. You can feel it in a crowded room, the strange loneliness of standing among people and realizing that if you quietly slipped out the door, it might be a long while before anyone noticed you were gone. You can feel it at the end of a long day of doing things no one thanked you for, the meals made, the work finished, the small, faithful tasks that keep a home or an office or a life running. All of it done in a kind of invisibility, as though you were the quiet machinery behind the scenes that everyone uses and no one sees. You can feel it when you are passed over again, when the credit goes to someone else, when the people you love seem to look right through you, when you scroll past everyone else's bright, celebrated lives and feel yourself growing smaller and dimmer by comparison, until a quiet voice inside whispers the thing you are most afraid is true, that you do not really matter, that you are forgettable, that you could vanish, and the world would simply close over the space where you had been and go on without a ripple. If that ache is yours tonight, if you have felt unseen and overlooked and unimportant, like the one nobody chooses and nobody notices and nobody would miss, then I want to sit with you for this hour, gently, not to flatter you, and not to promise you that the world will suddenly start applauding, because I cannot make people see what they have been too busy or too blind to see, but to tell you something truer and more lasting than the world's attention, something that does not depend on being noticed by anyone, that you have never, for one single moment of your life, been invisible to the one who matters most, who has seen you all along, completely, tenderly, by name, and who has a long history of noticing exactly the people the world overlooks. So stay with me. Let me tell you what God says to the one who feels unseen. And let me say at the very start what I am not going to do, so you can trust me through the rest of this hour. I am not going to tell you that you are wrong to want to be seen, or scold you for the longing, because that longing is good and human, and we will honor it, not shame it. And I am not going to hand you the empty promise that if you just believe hard enough, the people around you will suddenly notice you, throw you a party, give you the recognition you have craved. Because I cannot make that happen, and I will not dangle it in front of you. The people who have looked past you may go right on looking past you. I cannot promise otherwise. What I can do is point you to a seeing that is deeper and surer than any human attention, a gaze that has been on you your whole life and will never waver, and to show you, through real lives, that the God you are dealing with has always had a particular tenderness for exactly the ones the world overlooks. That is a foundation that will hold you up whether or not another human being ever notices you at all, and it is the only thing that finally answers the ache. Let me begin by naming this ache honestly, because part of its loneliness is that so few people ever put it into words. It is the invisibility in the middle of a crowd, which is a stranger loneliness than being physically alone. To be by yourself is one thing, to be surrounded by people and still feel unseen. To be in the room and somehow not in anyone's awareness is another, sharper thing. You speak and the conversation moves on as though you had not. You offer something and it lands unacknowledged. You are present, and yet you have the eerie sense of being a ghost at the table, there but not registered, and you begin to wonder whether something about you is simply easy to overlook, easy to forget, as though you lacked whatever it is that makes a person noticed. And it does something to you over time, this being unseen, something quiet and corrosive. You begin to shrink yourself, to expect to be overlooked, to stop offering your thoughts because you assume they will be passed over anyway. You learn to take up less space, to ask for less, to need less. Because somewhere along the way, you absorbed the message that you were not quite worth noticing, and you began to believe it, and to live as though it were true. And the terrible thing is that the shrinking can become a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, the dimming of a light that was meant to shine, until even you begin to lose sight of the person you are underneath all that learned smallness. If that has happened to you, if years of going unseen have taught you to disappear, hear this gently. That shrinking is not humility, and it is not the truth of you. You were not made to be small and invisible. You were made to be known. And the dimming you have learned is a wound, not a virtue. And the God who sees you wants to call the real you back out into the light. It is the years of faithful, unthanked work, the labor that happens in the background of other people's lives, the mother or father who pours themselves out for a family that takes it as a given, who notices only when something is not done, the worker who keeps everything running and watches someone else be praised for it, the one who remembers the birthdays, sends the cards, makes the calls, holds the family or the friendship together with 1,000 small, invisible acts that no one tallies, that are felt only in their absence. There is a quiet grief in being the one who gives and gives in ways that are never seen, in realizing that your faithfulness has become so reliable that it has become invisible, simply expected, like air. And there is a particular loneliness in being needed but not seen, in being valued for what you do rather than known for who you are. People may depend on you completely, may fall apart without you, and yet you can sense that it is your function they treasure and not your person, that you are loved the way one loves a reliable tool for its usefulness, and that if you stopped being useful, the attention would simply move on. To be needed is not the same as to be known, and a person can be surrounded by people who depend on them and still feel utterly unseen as a self, still ache to be wanted not for the services they render, but simply for being who they are. If you have felt that, the strange isolation of being indispensable and invisible at the same time, hear this. God does not love you for your usefulness. He does not value you for what you produce or treasure you for what you do for Him. He loved you before you had done a single thing, wanted you for yourself, delights in you as a person and not as a function. To Him, you are never merely useful. You are beloved, known, wanted for who you are. And that is a love that would remain unchanged even if you could never do another useful thing again. And that word is especially for those of you who once were seen and now feel set aside, who remember a time of mattering and find yourselves, in a later season, slowly growing invisible. The older person whose counsel is no longer sought, whose stories the young have no time for, who feels the world moving on and leaving them behind. The one whose role is finished, the parent whose children no longer need them the way they did, the worker whose season of usefulness has passed, the one who feels they have outlived their own importance. There is a peculiar grief in having mattered once and feeling forgotten now, in watching your circle shrink and the invitations dwindle and the sense grow that you have become, to the busy world, someone to be managed rather than known. Hear this with all the tenderness it deserves. Your worth never rested on your usefulness or your season or your role, and it does not fade as those fade. God does not value you less now than when you were in your prime. His gaze has not cooled. His love has not moved on. To Him you are as precious in this quieter, more overlooked season as you ever were, perhaps more. And He has not forgotten you, and He never will. World without end. It is the experience of being passed over, again and again, while others are chosen. The role that went to someone else, the recognition that landed on a colleague, the love that turned toward another person while you stood there hoping. It is the lifelong position of the runner-up, the second choice, the one who is liked well enough but never quite chosen first. And the slow ache of watching, over a lifetime, the bright things go to others, while you are left with the quiet sense that there must be something about you that makes you forgettable, something the chosen ones have that you lack. And what makes it cut so deep is the conclusion you quietly draw over years of being passed over, that the problem must be you. If it happened once, you could call it chance, but when it happens again and again, when you are repeatedly the one not chosen, the mind builds a cruel and convincing case that there is some deficiency in you, some lack the others can sense, some reason you are forever the bridesmaid and never the bride, the assistant and never the one in charge, the friend and never the beloved. You search yourself for the flaw, the thing that makes you so easy to set aside, and you may never name it, but you become certain it is there. Hear this, because it is important. The pattern of being overlooked is very often not about a flaw in you at all. The world chooses by surfaces, by timing, by favoritism, by 1,000 things that have nothing to do with your real worth. And its choosing is shallow and often blind. That you have been passed over does not mean there is something wrong with you. It very often means only that the people doing the choosing were looking at the wrong things, with the wrong eyes, the way they have always done. It is the wound of feeling second best in the very places that should be safest. To feel unseen by a spouse who long ago stopped really looking at you. To feel like the less favored child, the one whose achievements drew less delight. To feel overlooked in your own family, your own circle, your own church, where you give your presence faithfully and yet feel that you could be replaced by anyone, that your particular self is not especially wanted or noticed or missed. That kind of unseenness, in the places meant to hold us most tenderly, cuts the deepest, because it is there, above all, that we long to be known. And there is a special grief reserved for the one who feels unseen inside their own faith community, in the very place that is supposed to be a family. To sit among God's people week after week and feel that no one would notice if you stopped coming. To serve quietly and watch others be celebrated. To long for connection in a room full of believers and still feel on the outside of it carries a particular sting. Because here, of all places, you hoped to be known. If that is part of your ache, know first that it is a real wound and not a small one. And know too that the failure of a community to see you is not a measure of your worth or a sign that God has overlooked you. People, even God's people, are often distracted, cliquish, blind, caught up in their own struggles, and their failure to notice you says far more about the limits of human attention than about your value. God is not like that. He sees you in the very pew where you feel invisible, knows exactly why you came and what you are carrying, and is nearer to the overlooked one in the back than to anyone the room happens to be celebrating. You may be unseen by the congregation. You are not unseen by its Lord. And it is the comparison the world now presses on you without mercy, the endless scroll of other people being seen. Everyone else, it seems, is celebrated, applauded, noticed, their moments witnessed and praised by crowds, while you go through your days unwitnessed, your small joys and quiet faithfulness applauded by no one. The screens have made the ache of being unseen sharper than it has ever been, because now you can watch, in real time, an entire world apparently being noticed and loved and celebrated, and feel yourself the one exception, the one face in the crowd that the spotlight never finds. And it is a rigged comparison, though it does not feel like one. What you are watching on those screens is not other people's real, unedited lives. It is the small, curated sliver each person chose to display, the moments of being seen and celebrated lifted out and put on show, with all the ordinary unseen hours, all the loneliness and the going unnoticed, carefully left out of the frame. You are comparing the whole unvarnished truth of your own life, including every moment you felt invisible, against a highlight reel of everyone else's moments of being seen. Of course you come up feeling like the only one overlooked. You are measuring your behind the scenes against their carefully chosen spotlight. The truth, hidden behind all those bright images, is that the ache of feeling unseen is nearly universal. That the very people whose visible lives make you feel invisible are very often lying awake with the same ache, feeling just as unseen behind their own performances. You are not the one exception to a world that is all being celebrated. You are one of a vast, quiet multitude who feel exactly as you do, and who hide it just as carefully. Underneath all of it is the deepest thing, which is not really a desire for applause at all, but a longing to be known, to matter to someone, to be seen, truly seen. Not for what you do or produce, but for who you are, and to know that your existence makes a difference, that you are not interchangeable, that someone would feel your absence. This is not vanity. It is one of the most human longings there is, woven into you by your Maker. And the ache of it when it goes unmet is real and worthy of tenderness, not shame. And notice the particular shape of that longing, because it is more than wanting to be looked at. You do not really ache to be stared at by strangers or applauded by a faceless crowd. Those things, even when they come, leave the deeper hunger untouched. What you ache for is to be known, which is a far rarer and more intimate thing. To have someone see all the way into you, the real you, the hidden thoughts and the private struggles and the secret hopes, and, having seen all of it, to stay, to want you, to love you still. That is the deepest human longing of all, to be fully known and fully loved at the same time. Because we fear that the two cannot coexist, that if someone truly knew us, all of us, they would not love us. And so we hide and settle for being loved only as much as we are known, which is never all the way. Here is the wonder at the heart of everything. God knows you completely, every hidden thing, every thought you would never say aloud, the whole unedited truth of you. And knowing all of it, He loves you still, fully, without reservation. The one thing you were most afraid was impossible, to be entirely known and entirely loved at once, is exactly what God offers you. He has seen all the way to the bottom of you, and He has not turned away. Now, before I go a step further, let me say something to the quiet shame that often rides along with this ache, because many of you feel embarrassed even to want to be seen. You tell yourself it is pride, vanity, neediness, that a good and humble person would not care about being noticed, and so you bury the longing and feel ashamed of it. But hear this: the desire to be seen and known is not a sin. God made you a person, not a function. and persons are made to be known. He did not design you to be content as invisible machinery. The longing to matter to someone is the echo of the way He made you, made for relationship, made to be known and loved. So do not despise the ache. It is not vanity. It is a homesickness for something real, and there is an answer to it. And the answer begins with a truth you may have forgotten, that you are already fully seen. Think of it this way. The very first thing God said was not good. In a world He had called good at every other turn, was that the man was alone. Before there was any sin, any brokenness, in a perfect world, God looked at a person who was unknown by any other person and said, "This is not how it should be." He made us, from the very beginning, to be known, to be seen, to be in relationship. And so the ache you feel when you go unseen is not a flaw in you. It is the echo of the way you were designed, the signal of a real need that God Himself built into you and that God Himself intends to meet. You are not being needy or weak when you long to be seen and known. You are being exactly what God made you to be, a person built for relationship, feeling the absence of something you were created to have. And that means the longing is not your enemy. It is a compass. And if you follow it all the way down, past every human face that failed to satisfy it, it points to the one who made you to be known and who has known you, fully and lovingly from the very start. Let me show you a woman in the Scriptures who knew exactly this ache, the ache of being the unloved one, the overlooked one, and what God did with her. Her name was Leah, and her story is one of the quietest heartbreaks in all the Scriptures. She had a younger sister, Rachel, who was beautiful, and a man named Jacob loved Rachel with his whole heart. Through a deception by their father, Jacob ended up married to Leah first, though it was Rachel he wanted. And so Leah lived out the very nightmare so many of you know. She was the wife who was there, but not the one who was loved. The Scripture says it with painful plainness. It says she was hated, which means she was unloved, less loved, the one whose husband's eyes were always turning towards someone else. Imagine the daily ache of that, of living beside a person whose heart is elsewhere, of being the one who is tolerated but not treasured, present but not chosen, year after year. But here is the line that changes everything, the line I want you to hold on to tonight. The Scripture says, "And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated," the Lord saw. When no one else was looking at Leah, when her husband's eyes slid past her to her sister, when she was the overlooked one in her own marriage, in her own home, God was looking. God saw the unloved one. God saw what everyone else failed to see, and He moved toward her in her unseenness. He gave her children, and watch what she does with their names, because in those names you can hear her whole aching heart. She names the first one and says, "Surely the Lord has looked upon my affliction." The Lord has looked. She names them out of her longing to be seen and loved, hoping with each one that now, finally, she would be noticed. Now her husband would love her. The ache is right there in the names of her children, the cry of a woman desperate to matter to someone. And pause on the timing of when God moved toward her, because it preaches. The scripture does not say God saw Leah once she had made herself lovely enough to be chosen, or once she had won her husband's love at last. It says God saw her precisely in her unseenness, while she was still hated, still overlooked, still the one whose husband's heart was elsewhere. God did not wait for her situation to improve before he drew near. He drew near because it had not. Her very unseenness was what moved him toward her. And that is how he is with you. He is not waiting on the far side of your loneliness for you to finally be noticed and chosen, and then, once you are doing better, to come and join the celebration. He comes to you now, in the unseenness, while it is still raw, while the ache is still unanswered, because the overlooked and the unloved are exactly the ones his heart moves toward first. You do not have to climb out of this valley of feeling invisible before God will come near. He is nearest to you in the very middle of it, the way he was nearest to Leah while she was still the unloved wife crying out through the names of her sons. And here is what God did with the overlooked, unloved sister, the one nobody chose. From Leah, not from the beloved Rachel, came the line of Judah. From Leah's overlooked womb came the tribe of kings, the line of David. And at the very end of that line, the Messiah himself, the Savior of the world. The one who was hated, unloved, second best, passed over, became the mother of the royal line, the ancestress of the Christ. God took the woman the world overlooked and made her the channel of the greatest blessing the world has ever known. He did not just see her in her unseenness, he honored her, lifted her, made the overlooked one essential to his whole plan of salvation. That is how God treats the unseen. He does not merely notice them from a distance. He builds his kingdom through them. And there is one more tender detail in Leah's story worth holding. By the time she bore her fourth son, something had shifted in her heart. With the first three, she named them out of her aching hope that her husband would finally love her, finally see her. Every name was a cry aimed at a person who kept looking past her. But with the fourth, she said something different. She said, "Now will I praise the Lord," and named him Judah, which means praise. Somewhere in her long unseenness, Leah had begun to turn from the husband who would not see her to the God who already did. And in that turning, she found something the human love she craved had never given her. A praise that did not depend on finally being chosen by the person she longed for. She had stopped naming her children after her wound and started naming them after her God. That is a quiet picture of where the ache of being unseen can lead you, if you let it. Not into endless striving for a human love that keeps slipping away, but into the arms of the one whose gaze was on you the whole time, where the longing finds, at last, a place to rest. Let me pause here for a moment, because I know that for some of you, this ache has grown very heavy. Heavy enough that the lie has begun to take a darker shape, whispering not just that you are unseen, but that you would be better gone, that no one would truly miss you. If that is where the dark has taken you tonight, please do not believe it. And please do not carry it alone. Tell someone, a friend, a pastor, a counselor, a helpline in your country, someone who can remind you in a human voice of what is true. Because you matter more than you can feel right now, and your absence would tear a hole in this world that you cannot see from inside the ache. If it would help, write one word in the comments, just the word "here," so that you can see how many other unseen ones are sitting in this same quiet ache tonight. And so you know you are not as alone as you feel. You are not. Now, let me tell you about a small man in a tree. Because his story is for everyone who has ever felt lost in the crowd. There was a man named Zacchaeus, and two things were true of him. He was small, and he was despised. He was a tax collector, which in his day meant a traitor and a cheat, the kind of man the whole town looked down on. And on top of that, he was short, small of stature, the kind of man who gets lost behind taller people, who cannot see over the crowd. One day, Jesus was passing through his town, and the crowds pressed in, and little Zacchaeus, despised and unable to see, did something almost undignified. He ran ahead and climbed up into a tree just to catch a glimpse of Jesus over the heads of the people who blocked his view. Picture him up there, the small, hated man, perched in the branches, expecting nothing more than a distant look at a passing teacher. One more moment of watching the important things happen to other people while he observed, unseen, from the edges. And then Jesus stopped. Of all the faces in that pressing crowd, of all the people clamoring for his attention, Jesus stopped beneath that tree and looked up and saw the one man everyone else had written off. And he called him by his name, Zacchaeus. He knew his name. Out of the whole crowd, the despised little man hiding in the leaves, hoping only not to be noticed while he watched, was the one Jesus singled out, named, and chose. "Come down," Jesus said, "for today I must stay at your house." The one nobody saw was seen. The one nobody wanted was chosen. The one lost in the crowd, small and despised and overlooked, heard the Lord of all creation speak his own name and invite himself home. Because that is what Jesus does. He sees the ones the crowd looks past. He knows the names the world has forgotten, and he moves, deliberately, toward the overlooked one in the tree. And do not miss why Jesus said he had come, because he said it on that very day, in that very house. He said, "The Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." To seek. Jesus was not a passive presence who happened to notice Zacchaeus when the little man managed to climb high enough to be seen. He was actively looking, seeking, on purpose, for exactly the kind of person everyone else had written off. The seeking was the whole point of his coming. So understand what that means for you tonight. You do not have to climb high enough, perform well enough, or make yourself impressive enough to finally catch God's eye. He is not waiting for you to do something noticeable enough to earn his attention. He is already seeking you, already moving toward you, the way he moved toward the despised man in the tree. Because seeking out the overlooked and the lost is not a thing God does reluctantly. It is the very reason he came. You are not chasing a God who keeps looking past you. You are being sought by a God who came precisely for the ones the world overlooks. And notice that Jesus did not simply acknowledge Zacchaeus from a distance and move on, a quick nod to the overlooked man before continuing on his way to more important people. He said, "Today I must stay at your house." He invited himself in, sat at the table of the man the whole town despised, shared a meal, stayed, The crowd was scandalized. They muttered that he had gone to be the guest of a sinner, of all people, of this little cheat everyone looked down on. But that is exactly the point. Jesus did not just see Zacchaeus. He drew near to him, entered his home, gave him not a passing glance, but his presence, his company, his friendship, in front of the very crowd that had written the man off. That is what God offers you. Not a distant, dutiful acknowledgement, but nearness, presence, a coming in to sit with you where you are. He does not see you from far away and leave you in your loneliness. He comes close. He stays. He makes his home with the overlooked one. And he is not embarrassed to be found in your company, whatever the crowd may think. And to show you that this is not just ancient story, that God still sees and chooses the ones the world deems too small to matter, let me tell you about a woman from not so long ago, a woman the experts looked at and dismissed. Her name was Gladys Aylward, and she was a parlor maid in London, a working-class girl with little education, nothing about her that the world would call remarkable. She became convinced that God was calling her to take the gospel to China, and so she applied to a respected missionary society. And they looked at her, this ordinary housemaid who had struggled with her studies, and they turned her down. She was not qualified, they decided. She would never master the difficult Chinese language. She was not the kind of person God uses for great things. She was, in the eyes of the experts, overlookable, an unlikely candidate, easy to pass over. But God saw her differently than the experts did. Rejected, undeterred. She went back to scrubbing floors and saving her pennies, and she prayed a prayer that has outlived everyone who dismissed her. Something close to this: "Here is my Bible. Here is everything I have. Here is me. Somehow, please, use me." And with barely a handful of coins, far too little for the proper passage, she set out alone across the world, by train and boat and mule. This small, unqualified, overlooked woman. And she got to China, and she learned the very language they said she could never learn, and she won the trust of people who had never trusted a foreigner. And in time, when war came, she led nearly 100 orphaned children on foot across mountains to safety. The woman the experts deemed unfit became one of the most remarkable missionaries of her age. She thought so little of herself that she did not even believe her story was worth telling. The world called her the small woman. But God had seen, in that overlooked housemaid, exactly what the experts missed, and he used the one they passed over to do what the qualified never did. That is the God you are dealing with tonight. He has a long, long history of seeing the ones the world overlooks. And notice what it was the experts were measuring when they dismissed her. The outward things, the schooling, the credentials, the test scores, the visible qualifications. The surface a committee can assess in an afternoon. They looked at the outside of Gladys Aylward and saw nothing remarkable. And by their measures, they were not even wrong. She really did lack the things they were looking for. But they were looking at the wrong things entirely. They could not see the heart, the depth of her love, the stubbornness of her faith, the willingness that would carry her across a continent on a handful of coins. Those things do not show up on an exam. And that is the difference between the way the world sees and the way God sees. And it is everything. The world will keep assessing you by the surface, by the visible, by the things that can be measured and compared. and by those measures you may well be passed over again and again. But God is reading something the world cannot even detect. He is looking at the heart, at what you love, at who you are when no one is watching. And there, He may see a worth and a calling that no committee, no crowd, no casual glance would ever guess. Do not accept the world's assessment of you as the final word. The experts looked at a housemaid and saw nothing. God looked at the same woman and saw a missionary. He is looking at your heart right now, and He sees what the world has missed. And there is one more thing in her story that speaks straight to the unseen. Gladys Aylward never set out to be remarkable, never sought the spotlight, and when fame eventually found her late in life, it made her uncomfortable. She genuinely did not think her own story was worth telling. She had simply made herself available. An ordinary woman who said, "Here I am, use me," and then went and did the next thing in front of her, and the next, faithfully, for years, with no thought of being noticed. The greatness was God's doing, working through a willing, overlooked life. And that is the pattern you can trust for your own life. You do not have to manufacture significance. Do not have to claw your way into being noticed. Do not have to become impressive to matter. You have only to make yourself available to God, to say in your own quiet way, "Here I am, use me," and then to be faithful in the small, unseen things in front of you, and to leave the significance to Him. He has a long history of taking lives exactly that ordinary and that overlooked, and doing through them more than the impressive ever dreamed. Your job is not to become remarkable. Your job is to be available and faithful. The remarkable, if it comes, is His to give, and it will look like nothing you expected, and it will matter more than you will ever know. So let me tell you what is actually true about you, the thing that all of this is pointing to. There is a moment in the Scriptures where God is choosing a king, and everyone is looking at the tall, impressive, obvious candidates, and God says something that should change how every unseen person understands their life. He says, "The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Man looks on the surface, on the impressive, on the things that catch the crowd's eye, and so the world's seeing is shallow, and it misses people constantly, overlooks the quiet and the humble and the ordinary. But God does not see that way. God sees past the surface the world judges by, straight into the heart, into the real you that the crowd never bothers to look for. The very things that make you invisible to the world, your quietness, your ordinariness, your lack of the loud qualities that draw attention, are no barrier at all to the one who sees the heart. He is looking exactly where the world refuses to look, and there He sees you, fully, the real you, and He does not look away. And this means the very qualities that make you invisible to the crowd may be the ones that are most precious to God. The world overlooks the quiet, the gentle, the humble, the ones who do not push to the front, the ones who serve without announcing it. These traits draw no spotlight, win no applause, get a person passed over again and again. But these are exactly the qualities God prizes most highly, the very heart of what He calls beautiful. A gentle and quiet spirit, the Scriptures say, is in the sight of God of great price, of great worth, precious. The meek, Jesus said, will inherit the earth. The humble will be lifted up. So the things about you that the world treats as reasons to overlook you Your quietness, your gentleness, your unwillingness to elbow your way into the spotlight are not deficiencies in God's eyes. They are treasures. What makes you forgettable to a shallow world makes you precious to a God who sees the heart. And the day is coming when His valuation, not the world's, will prove to be the true one, and He count you precious down to the smallest detail. Jesus once said that not even a single small sparrow, sold for almost nothing in the market, is forgotten before God. And then He said the thing that should undo the lie of your invisibility forever. The very hairs of your head are all numbered. Numbered. The God of all the universe knows the number of the hairs on your head, attends to a detail of you so small that you yourself do not know it. You are not lost in the crowd to Him. You are not one forgettable face among billions. You are known to the depth of the smallest detail, watched over with a tenderness so complete that nothing about you escapes His loving attention. And let that truth do battle with the math that makes you feel small. You look at the billions of people in the world and think, how could I possibly matter to God? How could He notice one ordinary life among so many? But that is human arithmetic, and God is not bound by it. He is not a busy official with too many cases and too little attention, forced to overlook most people just to cope. He is infinite, and His attention is not divided among the billions, but given, whole and undivided, to each one, as though you were the only person He had to love. A mother of many does not love each child a fraction less. Love multiplies. It does not divide. So there is no crowd large enough to make you a number to Him, no population vast enough for you to slip through the cracks of His care. In the whole teeming world, He sees you as personally, as completely, as if you were the only one. There are no numbers large enough to lose you. Fear not, Jesus said, you are of more value than many sparrows. You have never once been overlooked by the eyes that matter most, and He knows your name. Not a label, not a number, not a face He cannot quite place, but your name, the particular name of the particular you, spoken by God with the warmth of recognition. The way the shepherd in the Scriptures calls his own sheep by name, and they know his voice. There is even a promise that one day He will give to each of His own a new name, known only to the one who receives it, a name that captures who you most deeply are, the true self the world never bothered to see. That is how known you are to God, that He has a name for the truest you, a name no one else knows, meaning He has seen all the way to the center of who you are and treasured what He found there. To the world, you may be one anonymous face, easily forgotten. To God, you are a name, a self, a particular and irreplaceable soul, known and called and loved by the one who made you. You are not a stranger to Him. He has known your name from the beginning. And think about what kind of seeing that is, because it is not the distracted, partial seeing of human attention. When a person notices you, they see a fraction, the surface, the part you let show, and even then only for a moment before their attention moves on. But God's seeing of you is total and unbroken. He sees you in the night and in the day, in the crowd and in the empty room, in your best moments and your worst. And He has never once looked away, never been distracted, never grown bored of you, never failed to notice. He saw you before you were born, knit you together in secret, and He will be gazing on you with love long after the last person who ever knew your name has forgotten it. There is no moment of your life, past or present or to come, that falls outside His attention. You have been seen, completely and continuously, by the only one whose seeing lasts forever. And that seeing is not cold inspection, but the warm, delighted, unwavering gaze of a father who treasures the child he is looking at. The world's attention is a flickering, partial thing. God's is a steady light that has never once gone out over you. So let me speak now to the lies that the ache of being unseen has been whispering to you in the dark. It tells you that no one sees you, that you move through the world unwitnessed and alone. But that is simply not true, however real it feels. You have been seen every moment of your life by the one who made you, who has watched over you with love since before you were born, who has never once looked away, who knows you more intimately and attends to you more closely than any human ever could. You have an audience of one who has never missed a single thing about you, not your quiet faithfulness, not your hidden tears, not the small, kind things you did when no one was watching. The most important witness in all of existence has had his eyes on you, in love, the whole time. And there is comfort, too, in knowing that he has seen the things no human ever could. The parts of your story that no one was there to witness. The kindness you showed when no one was looking. The temptation you resisted in private. The tears you cried alone in the dark where no one could comfort you. The prayers you whispered that no human ear ever heard. The quiet battles you fought and won where there was no one to cheer. All of it was witnessed, every bit, by the one who was there in the room when you thought you were utterly alone. You have never once suffered unwitnessed, never once been faithful unseen, never once wept without a tender witness counting every tear. Even in your most private and most lonely moments, especially in those moments, you were seen, held in a gaze of love, accompanied by a presence you could not feel, but that never left. The loneliest hours of your life were not as alone as they felt. He was there, seeing, the whole time. It tells you that you do not matter, that your life makes no difference, that you are interchangeable and forgettable. But you are not interchangeable to God. There has never been and will never be another you. And He did not make you by accident or include you as filler. He made you on purpose, wanted you into existence, knit you together with intention, and your life touches other lives in ways you will never fully see, ripples of influence from your quiet faithfulness that spread further than you know. The unseen good you do is not wasted. It is seen, treasured, and woven by God into a story far larger than the small, unnoticed corner where you live it out. Consider how much of what holds the world together is precisely the unseen faithfulness of people no one notices. The world celebrates the loud and the visible, the famous and the spotlighted, but it is carried, quietly, on the shoulders of millions of unseen ones. The faithful parents and the steady workers, and the quiet servers, and the ones who simply keep showing up in love day after day with no audience at all. Take away the seen and celebrated, and the world would hardly notice. Take away the unseen faithful, and everything would collapse. You may feel that because your life is small and unwitnessed, it cannot matter much. But the opposite is closer to the truth. The unseen, faithful, ordinary love that you pour out is the very stuff the world is actually held together by. And it matters infinitely more than the loud things that draw the crowds. God knows this, even when the world does not. He sees the hidden ones holding everything up, and He counts them among the truly great. However little the world's spotlight ever finds them, it tells you that you are unremarkable, that you will never amount to anything, that you lack whatever it takes to matter. But remember the housemaid the experts dismissed, and remember that God specializes in exactly the people the world calls unremarkable, that He delights to take the overlooked and the underestimated and do through them what the impressive never could. Your worth was never going to be measured by the world's standards of remarkable. In the economy of God, a quiet life of faithful love is among the most remarkable things there is. And He is not impressed by the loud things that impress the crowd. He treasures what the world overlooks. In fact, when you read the Scriptures, you find that God seems almost to go out of His way to choose the ones the world would never pick. A shepherd boy, the youngest and least, overlooked even by his own father when the prophet came looking for a king. A stutterer to be his spokesman. Fishermen and tax collectors, not scholars and rulers, to be the founders of His church. A young peasant girl, unknown and unremarkable, to bear His Son. Again and again, He passes over the impressive and the obvious and reaches instead for the overlooked, the unlikely, the ones no committee would have chosen, as if to make unmistakably clear that His kingdom does not run on the world's measures of remarkable. So, when you feel too ordinary to matter, too unremarkable for God to use, you have it exactly backwards. The ordinary and overlooked are precisely the ones He has always loved to choose, not in spite of their being passed over by the world, but almost because of it. So that when something beautiful comes of their lives, everyone can see that it was God's doing, and not the polish of an impressive resume. Your ordinariness does not disqualify you. In the hands of God, it has always been the very thing He delights to use. And it tells you that your quiet faithfulness is wasted, that because no one sees it, it counts for nothing. But Jesus spoke specifically of the things done in secret, the giving no one sees, the prayers prayed alone, the faithfulness with no audience, and He said that your Father, who sees in secret, sees it all. Nothing you have done in love has gone unrecorded. The very faithfulness that feels invisible, the things you did that no one noticed or thanked you for, are seen and kept and honored by God. And they are not small to Him. He has been watching the whole time, and He forgets nothing. And one day, every hidden, unseen, unthanked act of love will be brought into the light and honored before all. Hold on to that promise, because it reverses everything the world's accounting tells you. In this life, so often, the loud are rewarded and the quiet are overlooked. The self-promoting rise and the humbly faithful are forgotten, and it can seem that the whole system is rigged against the unseen. But the Scriptures promise a day of setting right, a day when the hidden things are made known, when the first are last and the last are first, when the quiet servant no one noticed is brought forward and honored before the watching universe, and the one who saw every unrecorded kindness says, "Well done." Nothing will have been lost. Every unseen tear, every unthanked sacrifice, every small faithfulness performed in the dark with no audience, all of it kept, all of it remembered, all of it, brought at last into the light and crowned. The world's spotlight is brief and shallow and often lands on the wrong things. God's recognition is eternal, and it falls, at the end, exactly where it should, on the faithful and the overlooked and the humble who served in secret. You are not working for nothing. You are storing up a recognition that will outlast every applause this world ever gave to anyone. So what do you do when you feel invisible? A few gentle things for living loved even when you feel unseen. Let the longing to be seen lead you all the way to the only one who can finally satisfy it. The reason being noticed by people never quite fills the ache, even when it comes, is that the longing underneath is too deep for human attention to reach. You were made to be fully known and fully loved by God. And no amount of human applause was ever going to be enough, because it was the wrong size for the whole. So bring the ache to Him. Let it drive you not into bitterness or despair, but into the arms of the one who sees you completely. Receiving His seeing, His knowing, His love is the only thing that finally quiets the longing, because it is the very thing the longing was always for. And there is a freedom in this that can change your whole life, if you let it sink in. Once your deepest need to be seen is met by God, who sees you perfectly and loves you completely, you are released from the desperate, exhausting bondage of needing it from everyone else. You no longer have to anxiously chase the notice of people who keep looking past you. No longer have to perform and strive and shrink and contort yourself, trying to finally be enough for a crowd that was never going to satisfy you anyway. When your cup is filled by the one whose seeing is total and unfailing, the inattention of others loses its power to crush you. It still stings, of course, we are human, but it can no longer define you, because your worth has been settled by a higher court, fixed by the gaze of God, and no human oversight can unfix it. The people in your life become free to love you imperfectly, to notice you sometimes and miss you other times, without the whole weight of your worth riding on whether they happen to see you on a given day. That is the freedom of the one who knows they are already fully seen by God. A heart no longer at the mercy of every passing human glance. And stop performing for a notice that will never satisfy. So much of the exhaustion of feeling unseen comes from the endless, anxious effort to finally be noticed, to do enough or be enough to earn the attention you crave. But you do not have to earn the seeing of God. You already have it, fully, for free. So you can lay down the performance, the striving to be impressive, the anxious bid for a spotlight that never quite turns your way, and simply rest in being already seen by the one who matters most. You are free to stop auditioning for the world's attention, because you already have the undivided, loving gaze of God. And consider how much energy that constant auditioning has cost you, how exhausting it is to live always slightly performing, always angling to be noticed, always reading the room to see whether you registered this time. The unseen often work twice as hard as everyone else, hoping that enough effort will finally earn them the notice that comes so easily to others. And it is a treadmill that never stops and never satisfies. Because the moment the attention fades, you are back to striving for the next bit of it. What a relief it is, then, to step off that treadmill, to let the striving fall away, to rest in a worth you do not have to earn, and a gaze you cannot lose. You can stop trying so hard to be seen. You can let your shoulders down. You can simply be, ordinary and unimpressive, and entirely beloved, without the exhausting campaign to prove you matter. Because the verdict is already in, settled long ago by the only judge who counts, and it cannot be revised by anyone's inattention. The performance is over. You can come home to being simply, restfully, yourself, fully seen and fully loved, with nothing left to prove. Do your quiet, faithful work as unto the one who sees in secret, and let that be enough. The meals, the care, the unthanked labor, the small acts of love no one notices, offer them up to God, who sees every one of them, and let His seeing be the reward, rather than waiting for a human thank you that may never come. There is a deep and steady joy available to the one who learns to work for the audience of one, freed from the bitterness of keeping score of who noticed, because the only one whose notice ultimately matters has noticed already and treasures it all. This does not mean your work no longer deserves human recognition, or that it is wrong to wish for a word of thanks. It only means your peace no longer hangs on getting it. There is a quiet dignity that comes over a person who has stopped doing good in order to be seen and started doing it simply because it is good and because God sees. The resentment drains away. The exhausting tally of who appreciated you and who did not loses its grip, and the work itself becomes lighter, almost joyful, because it is no longer a desperate bid for a notice that never comes, but an offering, freely given, to the one who never misses it. You can change diapers and clean floors and answer emails and care for the difficult and do the thankless task again tomorrow. And instead of the slow poison of feeling used and unseen, you can do it all as a kind of secret worship, a love offered up to God, witnessed and treasured by Him. And that changes the whole inner experience of a life that looks, from the outside, exactly the same. The work is the same. The heart doing it is free. And become yourself, one who sees the unseen. One of the most healing things a person who feels invisible can do is to start noticing the other invisible ones, the overlooked people all around you, the lonely, the unthanked, the ones the crowd looks past. Speak the name of the person no one notices. Thank the one whose faithful work goes unacknowledged. See the people the world overlooks, and in doing so, you become a small reflection of the God who sees. And you break the lonely spell of your own invisibility by becoming, for someone else, the one who finally noticed. And let yourself be truly known by a few, even though the years of being unseen may have taught you to hide. There is a quiet trap that the unseen can fall into. Having ached so long to be noticed, they grow guarded. They stop letting people in. They hide their real selves behind a careful, undemanding surface, and then wonder why no one sees them, not realizing that they have made themselves hard to see. If feeling invisible has taught you to disappear, to keep your real thoughts and longings and struggles tucked safely out of sight, then part of the way back is the brave, frightening choice to let one or two safe people actually see you, to risk being known, to speak the true thing instead of the easy one. You cannot make a crowd notice you, and you should not try. But you can stop hiding from the few who would gladly know you if you let them. Being known is not only something done to you, it is also something you allow. And the God who sees you fully invites you, gently, to come out of hiding and let yourself be seen. First by Him, and then by the handful of people He has placed near you to be the human face of His love. Let me leave you with this, and then I will let you go gently into your night. The same eyes that saw Leah when her husband looked past her, that found Zacchaeus hiding in the leaves and called him by name out of the whole crowd, that saw in a dismissed housemaid the missionary the experts could not see, those same eyes are on you right now, tonight, in whatever quiet and overlooked corner you are sitting. You are not invisible. You have never been invisible. The feeling of being unseen is real, but it is not the truth. Because the truth is that the one who made the stars and holds the universe together has had his loving gaze fixed on you your whole life, knows your name, has numbered the very hairs of your head, treasures the quiet faithfulness no one else noticed, and would no more forget you than a mother could forget the child she carried. You matter. Not because the crowd finally noticed, but because the God of all creation has never once looked away from you. So when the room feels like it cannot see you, when the work goes unthanked and the world's spotlight finds everyone but you, lift your eyes and remember that you are held in a gaze deeper and steadier and more loving than any human attention could ever be. You are seen. You are known. You are loved by name, and you always, always have been. And one day, when you stand in the light of His presence and finally see the one who has been seeing you all along, you will understand that you were never alone in the crowd, never lost in the shuffle, never overlooked. That through every unseen hour, His eyes were on you with a tenderness you could not feel, but that was always, always there. Until that day, walk gently through this world that so often fails to notice you, not with bitterness toward the ones who look past you, but with the quiet, unshakable peace of a person who knows they are already seen by the only one whose seeing lasts. Rest now, beloved and unforgotten one. You were never invisible to the one who matters most. He has seen you all along.